What do you call this? Ew, no. What's wrong with you? Hello and welcome to Flyover Culture, your guided tour to pop culture in the Midwest. I am a very parched Peyton Whaley. We in the Midwest have a certain way of speaking. These are tennis shoes. This is caramel, and we call the brutal winters and humid scorching summers God's punishment. But that certain bubbly beverage, we can't quite agree on what to call it. Do you say soda, or do you say pop? Or maybe a mysterious third thing I'm saving for later for narrative purposes. Growing up near St. Louis, it's always been soda to me. I mean, that's what it is. There's a whole stream for it. And yet, once I moved to Indiana, people called it pop. Like we're heading down to Riverdale for the sock hop. But they're not alone. In his 2016 book, Speaking American, Josh Katz surveyed over 350,000 Americans to find out who says what where. These competing vocabularies make what's called an isogloss, a border between places set by how the respective populations speak. Throughout the country, soda is the clear frontrunner, with 59% claiming the word. But pop is a different story. While only 18% say it, almost all of them are located in the Midwest or Great Plains states. And a study by students at the University of Wisconsin-Stout says there are even parts of the region that use soda and pop interchangeably. Leave it to the Midwesterners to be like, yeah, I guess whatever works. How did we get to this great soda schism in the first place? According to that same study, the term soda pop came about in the 1820s to describe seltzer water, then a hot new thing. That was then filtered down to just soda, which was used to describe carbonated water sold at soda counters in pharmacies. A bottle of pop and soda pop were slang used by flappers in the 1920s. Then pop made its first appearance as a solo act in the 40s as a term for what's basically ginger ale. As to why certain regions locked onto one or the other as their, nom de guerre, that's pretty fuzzy. But research shows that most people will default to the term corresponding to where they grew up. Or if that's too contentious, they'll just use the term that most people are using where they happen to be at the time. So those isoglosses don't really change much over time. The words we choose are shaped by a number of factors. As Sarah Etter wrote for the Penn State blog, a region's way of speaking is influenced by its inhabitants' social standing, their education, even the nationality of who originally settled that area. As linguistics professor James Lantoff told her, quote, "We call America the melting pot because it eliminates the differences between individuals, but language and its development retaliates against that concept." Soda, pop, soda pop, sody pop, slurpable brown gold. All valid names, all beautiful in their own right. Plus, it's a way to show off where you're from. But we're not done. Do you know what the third most popular name for this is? It's a Coke. And this is also a Coke. And this is a Coke. And this is a Coke. This is a Coke. Am I a Coke? Are you a Coke? Legally, you have to tell me. People who use Coke as a catch-all term typically reside down south, not too far from Coca-Cola's hometown of Atlanta. But they can also be scattered across the country, like my part-timer Danny, who's from Chicago. This episode was his idea, actually. In total, 17% of the Americans surveyed claimed Coke as their word of choice, mostly in the South, but dipping up into Indiana and Illinois, or as far west as California. Remember, that's just 1% lower than the pop crowd. So how does a single brand seep its way into a huge number of people's daily vocabulary? To find out, we spoke to the guy who basically wrote the book on Coca-Cola.
Hi, I'm Bart Elmore. I'm an environmental historian at Ohio State University, and I study big multinational firms and think about their environmental impact around the world. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, the kind of homeland of Coca-Cola, and when I went out to grad school, I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting to write a history of this company that basically I was surrounded by when I was growing up. So I dove into that story of the history of Coca-Cola, but looking at the ingredients that went into Coca-Cola and thinking about kind of how did this company acquire all these things, from the sugar it needed and the caffeine and the coca leaf to be everywhere.
In 2014, he released Citizen Coke. The book moves ingredient by ingredient through Coke's history and how it came to dominate the beverage market.
This is a product of this place. It started in 1886 in Atlanta, Georgia. When you think about the term soft drink, it wasn't very soft, to be honest with you, when it started. The original formulation for Coca-Cola had wine in it. It was an alcoholic drink. Pemberton's wine of coca It was based on this other drink that was very popular in France that had Bordeaux wine mixed with the coca leaf that would have infused it with small quantities of the alkaloid cocaine. So a pretty powerful drink. I joke with my students, it's like the Four Loko of the 19th century. Our president drank these drinks. The Pope drank this. So it was very, very popular. And interestingly, it's not the coca leaf or the alkaloid cocaine that's the problem for Coke. It's the alcohol. The city of Atlanta moves to ban the sale of alcohol in 1885, 1886. And as a result, you have John Pemberton, the creator of Coca-Cola, who's from Georgia. He has to figure some way out of this. So he takes out the wine and replaces it with carbonated water, which allows us to have all these other words for Coca-Cola, pop, and soda, and so forth and so on. It takes off pretty quickly. It's actually handed out for free. And it's a smart move because it's got a lot of caffeine. It still has the coca leaf and small quantities of the alkaloid, cocaine in it. It's got sugar in remarkable proportions. I think the original syrup was like 5 pounds of sugar per gallon of syrup. So imagine a gallon jug of milk with 5 pounds of sugar in it, which would have all sorts of implications down the road. But in the time, this was like an incredible drink, and it sold for 5 cents, which was the key to it.
Coca-Cola was aimed at a mass market. It spread primarily through soda fountains in the South, and soon after, bottles for the country at large.
After John Pemberton had died, another guy, Asa Candler, had taken over the company, and he agrees to bottle Coca-Cola in 1899. By the time we get to the 20th century, they're in every single state in the country. That's how fast they've spread. Starts in 1886, the formula without the wine of Coca-Cola, and already all the way across the country, including the Midwest.
Coca-Cola has this meteoric rise through the 1900s. And sure, part of that is having a product people want and is available just about everywhere. But a big part of it is a strategy that Elmore calls Coca-Cola Capitalism.
What made Coke great was not what it did, but what it didn't do. What was so startling when you looked at the history of how Coke got all these ingredients that made it great was that it really didn't own things. You know, it really operated as kind of a middleman in the economy, staying at arm's length from having those big capital investments in producing caffeine or, you know, having sugar plantations in the Caribbean or high fructose corn syrup plants. It let others do that business. And there's a great line from Robert Woodruff, who ran the company. You can make a lot of money if you don't care who gets the credit. I think that became Coke's kind of secret formula, as it were, for spreading far and wide by kind of limiting their capital investments in the actual infrastructure of making their product. In so doing, they then had this huge budget to advertise.
As Dr. Elmore told me, Coca-Cola wasn't the only company to operate this way. They were just really, really good at it.
That frankly became the model for how a lot of companies make money today. Certainly you have oil industries and things like that, but you have a lot of companies that I would say are kind of the brokers in the economy, the middlemen in the economy that are making money off the flow of goods, but not actually like owning and vertically integrating into all that infrastructure. Coke was so resilient, and part of it was because it could pivot, it was nimble, it could kind of shift. Whenever there was high fructose corn syrup cheaper, switch. Caffeine from decaf coffee, which is how they got a lot of their caffeine, switch. It was a pretty smart system for making money, and it made them a lot.
It's a business structure that allows for pivoting and huge growth. But as Dr. Elmore tells me, it carries with it potential for some huge problems.
Interestingly, by having kind of a nimble corporate system where you're not necessarily owning and operating or vertically integrating in all this, it turns out that that gives you an outsized influence on the environment. The problem with bottling and kind of relying on this franchise system to be able to spread so fast is that you end up becoming the single largest kind of plastic polluter in the world, which is what Greenpeace pegs Coke as, looking at plastic bottles. When we get to the pop of these soft drinks, we have to think about what that decision meant in terms of the waste that was generated and the fact that today we have so many single-use containers that don't get recycled. In the United States, only 30% of PET plastic bottles are recycled. 70% end up in landfills and in streams. So in the pace to try and conquer the globe and the world quickly, we have these huge costs that I think the company's really struggling to address. You gotta think about this from Coke's perspective. They sell 2.2 billion servings of their product every single day. When's enough, right? When have you You know, you've conquered the South, you've conquered the Midwest, you've conquered the globe. The real questions about how we create a sustainable economy is confronting that. When are we good? How do you show value without saying I have to sell more next year than I did last year?
So I probably can't fix capitalism in 15 minutes, but if there's one thing I can do on this show, it's make everything about the Midwest.
It turns out that there's a kind of interesting Midwest connection to Coke's global conquest. It happens because of Robert Woodruff, who became the president of Coca-Cola in the 1920s. He went to my high school, actually, which is really interesting. It was a school that they sent boys who were unruly to try and make them normal. And it didn't work for him, and it didn't really work for me. He wanted to work in his father's business in Atlanta after that, but he really butted heads with his father, who owned Coca-Cola at the time, Ernest Woodruff. So he went off to Cleveland, Ohio. And it was in Cleveland that he started working for the White Motor Company. He was a truck salesman. This is the 19-teens. You know, so the Ford Model T has just come out in 1908. You've got this kind of historical change that's taking place with the automobile just emerging, and he sees the future. What if we could get Coke in every single nook and cranny? As I said in another book, it's country capitalism. Let's see if we can get this in the rural countryside. And so when he comes back, his father says, come back and work for Coke. And he says, fine. I'll come back from Ohio. He's got this truck salesman's kind of mentality. He's the one who really spreads Coke into every, as he puts it, he says, I want this thing to be within arm's reach of desire.
Coincidentally, Arm's Reach of Desire is currently tearing it up on the Amazon bestseller list.
And it's basically true. Like, I could reach out from here, not in our house, we don't have any Coke products anymore, but like next door, you know, and when we're at school, at the university, I look out and I'm like, it's arm's reach of desire. That was the idea, which, by the way, has a huge impact because it has to be cold. What's the single largest portion of Coca-Cola's greenhouse gas footprint? Refrigeration, because it needs to be consumed immediately. That decision, you could argue, that traces back to Ohio with a truck salesman who's saying this needs to be cold in every little rural community so that you can drink it right away, had a huge ecological impact.
So it just might be that those ice-cold bottles found in every cup holder in the Midwest might be what solidified pop's dominance here.
As it spreads into these markets, it's now bottled. And I think for the Midwest, that's where you would have experienced it. In the South, it would have been soda fountains originally. You know, you're going to socialize and have the soda, the drink in that space. But as it spreads into the countryside, it's popping more because that's how you get it there.
After a century or so of chugging this stuff, we have part of the country that calls it Coke, likely because of its hometown ubiquity, another part of the country that calls it pop, probably from Coca-Cola's bottling efforts in the Midwest, and then the rest of the country that calls it soda, a holdover from soda fountains in pharmacies. In trying to learn why people in pockets around the country use Coke as a catch-all term, I wanted to ask Dr. Elmore, what does this say about our relationship with these Goliath companies?
My sense is that if we're going to fix some of the problems that we've talked about, the environmental issues, the labor issues, or the human health issues that are attendant to our economy, we have to look to ourselves. The more we keep asking brands to solve these problems, I think we're asking the wrong audience. We're the ones who really get to set the rules on what we consume and how we diet, what's in our usual routine. We really shouldn't be asking them to solve our problems. We should be trying to step up and do that by policies, by voting, by doing the things we need to do to shape the society we want to create.
Look, I'm not one to cast judgment on someone for how closely they associate with a soda brand. I don't need 1,000 angry juggalos coming after me. But Dr. Elmore says it's a chance to become a more mindful consumer.
You may be drinking in the Midwest, but this is a global story and system. And the more we ask questions about what's in the drink, what's in the name even, I think we really get to these deeper stories that will help us be better consumers, will help us be more just in our purchasing, because we'll understand where this thing came from.
A huge thank you to Dr. Bart Elmore of The Ohio State University for talking with me today. You can check out Citizen Coke for a more in-depth history of Coca-Cola, or you can head to his website for more of his writing. And if you enjoyed this, make sure you're subscribed to Flyover Culture. It helps us out a lot. Stay thirsty, and I'll see you next time.